Welcome. You're listening to the Keeping Ashland Healthy podcast, a podcast production of the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Ashland County, Ohio. Thanks for joining us. And welcome back to the Keeping Ashland Healthy podcast. My name is David Ross, Executive Director here at the Mental Health and Recovery Board. Another interesting episode, I think, for you that I know all of us have probably experienced to one degree or another, doom scrolling. What is David talking about? Well, doom scrolling, or why constant bad news is wearing us down. I'm drawing from an article that was recently put out by Glanze Patrick, which again I'll link to in the episode description. And this idea is, just constantly being overwhelmed with news, and rather than kind of disconnecting, we stay involved with it. We interact with it. I don't know if you've ever picked up your phone. Your intention was just to check the news. And then before you know it, 20 minutes have gone by. And guess what? You actually feel worse than when you started. Guess what? You're not alone. I'm guilty of this as well. So that's what we're talking about, doom scrolling, what it is, why it's so hard to stop, and how constant exposure to negative news and content actually affects our mental health, even when nothing bad is directly happening to us. Right? You might have started out in a really good place, and then after going through checking the news, you are fit to be tied, angry, yelling at people. So it's really not about being uninformed. It's about how much, how often, and how the human brain was never designed to live in a 24 hours crisis feed. And again, I know we enjoy our technological advancements. I do as well. Our new phones and devices and tablets and the speed of things. And, again, let's all blame Ted Turner for CNN and the 24-hour news cycle. A lot of people actually have written papers and talked about this. Once the 24 news cycle started and then basically caught on, that really did fundamentally change our relationship to the news and the news itself, if you will. So, all right, I should define it. What doom scrolling really is. So we know bad news has always existed, all right? What's changed is access, okay? Pre-smartphones, pre-computer, back in the 1800s, right? Bad news was happening. You didn't know about it. You didn't know about it unless it occurred really close to where you actually lived. And, the newspapers, the telephones didn't exist, et cetera. So I think we all intuitively know that our access to news, all news now, has increased exponentially, but particularly bad news, wars, violence, economic fear, political conflict, disasters. All of it now is just, it lives literally inches from our eyes. And guess what? It's refreshed every few seconds. So doom scrolling isn't simply reading the news. It's the repeated, unstructured consumption of negative information, often without a stopping point. So I'm not talking about 25 minutes of funny cat videos, okay? What we're talking about is negative information, okay? And here's the key insight. The brain does not experience doom scrolling as information. It experiences it as ongoing threat exposure. And that's one of the things I want you to take away from this episode. So you think you're just going on to get some information on what's going on in the world, but if it's phrased and written up and displayed to you in a negative fashion, that negative information isn't perceived as information by our brains. It's actually experienced as a threat and an ongoing threat exposure. So even, again, doesn't matter that the events are far away. Doesn't matter that we might even be personally safe in our own home. The human brain is wired to prioritize danger, regardless of if it's miles away. So, believe it or not, that negative information then it's processed faster. It feels more urgent. It's remembered longer. And again, these are all adaptive things that helped us in early on in our pre-industrial ages to survive. All right. But in a digital environment, that same system it never turns off. So research summarized in the piece I'm drawing from shows that constant exposure to distressing news, it elevates our cortisol levels. That's our stress hormone. It disrupts our serotonin balance, which we understand is related to moods. We don't know exactly how. We just know that it is. It keeps the nervous system in a semi-alert state. And people often describe feeling on edge. And again, they don't really have a clear reason. Hopefully after this podcast, you might have a better understanding of where that feeling of on edge has come from. It's come from the last 25 to 50 minutes of doom scrolling. People often describe feeling emotionally exhausted, even though they haven't done anything physically. Funny story on that. During the early days of the pandemic, where everything went online, as you know, I work for the board here, but the board is a unit of local government. So all the information that was being pushed out by the feds to the states, to the locals, we were in 6, 7, 8 hour Zoom is what we were using the platform, Zoom meetings every day, 4 or 5 times per day, or 4 or 5 times per week, multiple hours per day. We were getting all this information, and I was not physically active, but I am telling you, I was never more physically exhausted. Difficulty focusing, people often describe, irritability, numbness. So again, this does not mean you're not resilient. It means that your nervous system is stressed. It's stressed because it's doing exactly what it's designed to do, which is trying to protect you. So let me say that doom scrolling isn't as easy as you might think to stop, okay? So a lot of people ask, if it makes me feel worse, why do I keep doing it? Well, I think we might know, not just doom scrolling, in other areas of our life, we continue to do things for reasons, even though we know they're not healthy. But I will say some specific things to doom scrolling that the article points out is it's reinforced by uncertainty. The way it's presented to us is actually, I don't know, calculated sounds bad, doesn't it? But you've heard of the algorithm. Information, negative, positive, or otherwise, is presented to us in ways that research have found is attractive, dare I say addicting. So the brain wants closure, but the refreshing of your news feed, it promises answers, clarity, or relief, change. But online news rarely resolves, it escalates. So while our brains want closure, the way things are set up, it's not going to bring closure. All it's going to bring is the idea that you need to keep refreshing because things are changing. It's evolving. You need to find out what happens next. I don't know if you've experienced this watching something like Netflix, but back in the day, we had to wait. Kids, if you're listening, we had to wait a whole week to find out what happened next on our favorite episode of Happy Days. Now, people find that intolerable. If they can't binge the entire season or series, they won't do it until all of them have dropped so they can watch them all in succession, because heaven forbid they wait. Add to that, like I said, the algorithm-driven feeds, emotionally charged headlines, social validation through shared outrage, and suddenly stopping feels uncomfortable. Not because we're addicted to bad news per se, but because our threat system has been activated and it wants resolution, okay? So our threat system has been activated by the news. It wants some kind of resolution, but guess what? It's not going to be coming. And I'm saying that is engineered, if you will. It's not a personal failure. It's not really a fair fight in some ways. But I'm going to help you here with the podcast, hopefully, to give you some tools. So doom scrolling, sleep, and mental fatigue. One more thing. I got to talk about this. One of the most immediate effects of doom scrolling shows up at night. Emotionally charged content before bed is no bueno. Don't do it. It delays melatonin, fragments sleep, reduces deep restorative sleep. It is not good for your rest to do this right before bed. People and authors say things like, I slept 8 hours, but I'm exhausted. Well, because your brain was never really fully powered down. Okay, so even if you get technically 8 hours, if you're doom scrolling right before sleep, it's going to really impact the quality of your sleep, okay? And then we know this. Poor sleep increases anxiety sensitivity. It reduces your ability to regulate your emotions. It makes the day feel heavier, if you will, which often leads right back to the more scrolling, looking for reassurance. And that's that loop that can be very, very detrimental, okay? So a way forward, a human-centered way forward. As you know, at the Mental Health and Recovery Board, we don't believe the solution is a disconnect from reality. We definitely believe in being in touch with our reality, but in a way that's restores proportion, agency, and recovery time. So some of the things I'm going to suggest, maybe all of these things, give them a try, but whichever ones seem to fit best for you. I would maybe start with some intentional news boundaries. Set specific times to check the news. Try to stick to that. Avoid endless feeds. Choose direct sources over algorithmic scrolling, okay? I won't mention some of the platforms that the algorithm is particularly strong, but what we mean by this is look for a specific site that you trust. Look for 3 or 4 specific headlines that maybe the site has. Limit yourself, and then move on to the rest of your day. Evening protection. So don't go after emotionally charged news before bed. Don't do it. Give the nervous system time to stand down, if you will. Design, not discipline. What I mean by this is disable non-essential notifications. This stuff is crazy, right? You could, all these different programs, apps, website, they all want to send you these notifications. And those are like little dopamine, little hits, right? They're trying to get your attention, say, oh, something's changed. You need to pay attention. You need to pay attention. So disable those. By and large, if it's not essential, get rid of that. So you're not constantly distracted with these notifications. Reduce visual stimulation that drives compulsive checking. So again, maybe not having things on your screen that will pull you in, blank screen or a screen saver. When it pops up, it's pretty benign. It doesn't draw you in, okay? Think about neutral space. The brain needs periods of emotional neutrality. So think about whether that's a room, maybe that's going outside, maybe that's just not being around TV devices at all, maybe that's reading, but we need a break from all the electronics and the fast-moving pace of even TV. Calm, remember, is not avoidance, it's regulation. Okay, so David's not telling you to be a Luddite. If you don't know what a Luddite is, look it up. And there's 2 D's in Luddite. But calm is not avoidance, it's regulation. We need to regulate. When threat exposure decreases, okay, and when you do regulate, your body will notice it doesn't have to be, and it's not being threatened, so it doesn't have to respond as if it's being threatened. So when you start to regulate, the threat exposure decreases, and when your body senses that the threat no longer exists, it recalibrates pretty quickly, and you can relax. Okay, so that's the good news. So think about boundaries, think about evening protection, think about design, not discipline with your notifications, and then make sure you're regulating through some neutral space. 4 basic things I think that are realistic. So doom scrolling doesn't mean you're weak. It means you're human in a system that profits from your attention. So keep this in mind. This was not randomly, haphazardly created. You know, these apps and news feeds were specifically designed to profit from your attention. Okay, so it's okay if you take these actions because in some ways it's not a fair fight. You probably didn't even know these things were designed with so much intentionality to capture your attention, but they were. But we know that your mental health will improve, not because the world suddenly gets better, but because the brain finally gets a chance to rest, okay? So in Ashland County, we believe recovery includes context, connection, meaning, agency. These words I use a lot on the different podcasts. Sometimes the most powerful mental health intervention is simply deciding when and how we let the world into our minds. Okay. That is regulation. Okay. That could be people, that could be your devices, but we just need to take care the kinds of people, places, and things that are in our lives and to what extent. All right, everybody. Well, I appreciate your listening, and come back next time for another exciting edition of Keeping Ashland Healthy. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Keeping Ashland Healthy podcast. The podcast is a production of the Mental Health and Recovery Board of Ashland County, Ohio. You can reach the board by calling 419-281-3139. Please remember that the board funds a local 24/7 crisis line through Appleseed Community Mental Health Center. It can be reached by calling 419-289-6111. That's 419-289-6111. Until next time, please join us in Keeping Ashland Healthy.